Welcome to Conversations on Nationalist Hub. It's possibly as complex as it can get, and the Naga issue, even after 90 years, is still waiting for a solution. The Nagas have always believed that they have a unique history and identity. Historically, the Nagas have never been under the Indian rule or even the British rule, and they say that this has been accepted by the governments of those days and even now. Therefore, if the Nagas have a unique identity and history, the solution also must be unique. The Naga peace process has been going on under 6 prime ministers, starting from Jawaharlal Nehru to Narendra Modi now. It's, however, interesting to note that while talks with the various prime ministers had failed to achieve a solution due to the sovereignty demand of the Naga leaders, the agreement signed by the Modi government in 2015 hinged on the concept of one strong nation, brought them to the table on a promise of shared sovereignty. Some of these Naga issues date back to the colonial era, including the demand for a greater Nagaland or Nagalim, covering Nagaland, its neighboring states, even parts of Myanmar, and has been an important part of the Naga nationalism. It's a demand being made for decades and was first crystallized via the formation of a Naga club in 1918. The Naga club had reportedly told the Simon Commission that the Naga should be left alone to determine for ourselves as in the ancient times, unquote. On August 14, 1947, the Naga National Council, or NNC, led by Angami Zapu Fizo, declared Nagaland as an independent state. This was one day before India became independent. Fizo also formed an underground Naga federal government and a Naga federal army in 1952. Which the Indian government crushed by sending in the army in Nagaland and enacting the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. While the present situation is far better than what it was before, one needs to read with caution. From the Simon Commission of 1929 to the Naga Club, which included 20 signatories, all of them from the Naga Hills, and submitted a memorandum to John Simon. Now, the 2015 agreement signed within a year of the Modi government assuming power, there has been a softening of stance on both sides. But things are not done and dusted as of yet. And as the botched-up operation by the Special Para Group showed, a small incident can set things back to square one. Today, we are here to look at the Naga issue with someone who understands the issue like the back of his hand. Shri Padmanabhaiah, a retired civil service officer and a former Home Secretary of the Government of India. He has spent considerable time as the centre's interlocutor in the Nagaland issue. He has headed many government committees such as the Committee on the Police Reforms, the Committee on the Reorganization of the Services Selection Board, and the Committee to review the working of the National Institute of Urban Management. Shri Padmanabhaiah is presently the chairman of the Court of Governors of the Administrative Staff College of India in Hyderabad. The Government of India awarded Shri Padmanabhaiah the 3rd highest civilian honor of Padma Bhushan in 2008 for his contribution to the Indian civil service. Shri Padmanabhaiah had a stint as the government representative for the settlement of the ethnic conflict of Nagaland in 1997. During his service as a representative, which lasted till his resignation in 2009, he assisted in maintaining the ceasefire agreement as well as the dialogue with the insurgents. Now, let's cut across to the interview that we're having with Shri Padmanabhaiah. If you ask any Indian where Nagaland is or what the capital of Nagaland is, it would take some time for them to understand and point it out. Forget common man. Even many politicians in our country are not aware where the northeastern states start and where it ends. The geography, the terrain, the name, the tribes, the language, and even the cuisine. One vexed issue that has been with us for a long time has been the issue of Naga, or what they call as Nagaland, which is a greater Nagaland beyond just the present state of Nagaland. The issue is very complex and dates back to the Simon Commission in the British days. But that has led to a lot of other bad blood, and in between, insurgency over last 6 decades. 6 prime ministers have negotiated with different groups in Nagaland. And one person who knows the issue like the back of his hand is Shri Padmanabhaiah, who is with us today, a retired civil service officer. Shri Padmanabhaiah has headed various committees after he retired. But the most important thing what he has done is the Nagaland issue, negotiating with different insurgent groups and of course trying to arrive at a solution over a period of time. And I think there's no other person better than Shri Padmanabhaiah to speak on this issue. Thank you for speaking to us at Nationalist Hub, sir. Thank you very much for coming.
Yeah.
Thank you. My first question obviously to you would be, where did this all start? We know that this is not an issue that started yesterday. I mean, this has been there, as I said, the Simon Commission and before that. But where is the genesis of this problem of Nagaland?
I don't know whether we should go into the genesis. It's a long history. I think we need not. Actually, the problem is Indians, while trying to solve the political problems, they don't go into history very much, the Indian authorities and all that. Whereas the Nagas believe very much in the history. They are wedded to history. So some event takes place and then they would keep it in their mind. You have said this at a particular point of time. Mahatma Gandhi has said something at this point of time. You see, what has happened is, the Naga areas are most inaccessible areas. Assam itself was one of the last states in India which has gone under the British rule, 1826 or so. And when they occupied Assam, it was called East Bengal, in fact, at that point of time.
Right.
So, not the East Bengal of Bangladesh. So, from Bengal, they went into that area. They called it the East Bengal province. But thereafter, they only went into the plain areas. They could not go into the hill areas, the British also. Slowly, they went on into those particular areas. That's why all that area is called the Northeast Frontier Tract. Nagaland was not part of that, except some portion, in Arunachal Pradesh where the Nagas are there. And then the Northeast Frontier Tract, then Northeast Frontier Agency, then that became divided into various states and all that. And an inner line permit was required to go into those areas. Because one is, you cannot, the British government was not prepared to take the responsibility for the lives of the people who cross and go into the particular area. So while technically the Nagaland area, the area covered by the present Nagaland and all that, was within the British territory, it was not ruled by them. It was completely left to the local agencies to rule themselves according to their genius. Then when the freedom movement started, as you said, the Simon Commission and all that, these people said that leave us to our own this one. We don't want to join India. We don't want to join anywhere. So we are happy as it is. So let us continue our lives like this. And then what happened? Then the independence movement started and all that. So 1946 or 47 actually, independence came on 15th. But in July, the then governor of Assam had a negotiations with these people at the instance of the government of India. That is called Sir Akbar Hyderabad Agreement, a 9-point agreement. In that agreement, he said, if you are paying for the services, if you are collecting the taxes and you pay, all the services are yours. Why should we rule you? And then the land is yours. So it is worth reading that 9-point agreement of Sir Akbar Hyderabad. So it's almost a blank check to them, saying that you can rule your own area. And no law of the government of India or the state legislature, Assam was there, would apply to you unless you accept that. This type of, this one was done. During British time itself, I forgot to tell you, these areas were called excluded areas. Partially excluded areas, fully excluded areas and all that. Excluded means what? From the operation of the constitution as prevailed at that time. The 1935 Act, the British government and all that. So they always had this one and nobody disturbed them. But when independence came and then about that, negotiations were going on, these people had a fear. The fear was there is a small population. India's population is huge. Whether they would completely overrun their territory, their culture and other things would be completely wiped out. And this fear was there. And this fear was triggered by the British to some extent. British in the sense, the British officers who were ruling that particular roost. In fact, I would tell you, since you asked the history, these people have floated, the local officers, the ICS officers at that point of time, saying that this particular area of the tribal belt, which was called partially excluded, frontier tracts and all that, inner line permits, that separatism was sort of growing, deliberately grown. And they said, you don't have to join, but we would create what is called, there are negotiations going on to create what is called a crown colony in the northeast, covering the parts of India, parts of Pakistan was not there, it was going to be the Chittagong area, some areas of Bangladesh, Burma, all these would be constituted in a crown colony. You are assured, this type of, promises were made or hopes were shown. So that's how it became slightly that is the origin. And then what we did was, for example, independent India's, just prior to independence, I told you, Hyder Agreement.
Correct.
Then they took a plebiscite in 1950. Plebiscite means what in those days when the traffic was, the communications and transport facilities were not there. The tribes were not well educated. Naga is not one tribe. There are so many tribes. At least in Nagaland, there are about 17, 18 tribes, But the Fizo, who was their leader, called all of them for a plebiscite, Maidan in Kohima. And then he said, what is the plebiscite? It was not a written plebiscite. He asked, do you want freedom or do you want slavery? So everybody would say, we want freedom. So that is, he said 99% have voted in favor of, who is that 0.1% I wouldn't know, who have not voted. So this is how it went on. And then the government, Nagaland was the first state to be formed by the independent India. New state was created called Nagaland in 1963, the first state to be created in the country. But that did not solve the problem. So there were people always, groups were there. Leadership problems were there amongst the Nagas. One tribal group, because there were so many tribes, they didn't have a common language also. Now it's called, the common language between all the Nagas is called Nagamis, means Assamese plus some mixture of a few words from each tribe, the Nagamis. So, what was I saying?
No, the main problem that you were describing was the fact that the British left it as a unfinished agenda.
Unfinished agenda, So that's how it went on. And because there were so many militant groups or insurgent groups, fight for leadership between them and all that also has added to this problem. So in spite of the government efforts by creating a state, it did not settle down. Then in 1964 or so, Jayaprakash Narayan led a team called Peace Mission. Michael Scott and this gentleman and Chaliha, these people formed a peace mission and they went and tried to sort of bring some peace. Gandhiji in his he said, look, if somebody is sort of taking your freedom, I would be the first man to face the bullet and all that. He made some statements like that. These were literally interpreted by these people saying that Mahatma Gandhi, when traveling in, a guest house in Guwahati has said this, Jawaharlal Nehru has said this, your Hyder Akbari has said, you have the total freedom. They depend on that. So let us not go into history too much, But over the course of time, the reason why it continued, I want to tell you, is because of a sort of complete neglect by the political element in Delhi about the northeastern region. You see, whenever, this is my interpretation, whenever a nation has obtained freedom, your first responsibility is to take care of the boundaries, the borders. Your borders must be strengthened. And as I always give an example, if you don't take care of your borders, it is like your bedrooms being open, to everybody. So they would come and foul your bedroom. So you should have taken care of the border areas. But because the tribals, Christians, and then on the other side, the Chinese border, the people are ethnically again different, they are Buddhist religion. All these problems came because we didn't give proper emphasis to our border areas. There could be historical reasons, in the sense you became independent. India is a huge country. There are internal problems here. You must first take care of this. The first focus is here. That's how there was little focus there. A third reason I want to mention to you, because the historical, this one is very, very important. The development has not taken place there. It is a hilly area, forested area, wildlife, roads are very, very minimal. Even today, you know, the national highway, 1 or 2 national highways pass there. You know, while discussing about the recent times in 2000 year and all that, I used to mention to the ministers, saying one thing you should do to see that the insurgency in Nagaland or in the northeast comes down is have 4-lane, 6-lane broad highways connecting one state capital to the other, from one end of the northeast to the other. Have floodlight these areas so that in the night, in the midnight, you can travel safely. You know, the time difference is there between the northeast and the rest of India. It is almost about 2 hours difference, you know. By 4:35 in the evening, it becomes very dark. People cannot travel. And on the roadside, on the narrow roads, the grass grows up to the height of about 4 feet, 5 feet. Any militant insurgent can take shelter there. And you know, Zamir, his life, there was an attempt made on his life. 4 or 5 people in his group died because traveling on the road from the grass, this one they shot. So clean up these areas. It's being done now. Have airline, this one, it's happening. Railways are a difficult problem there because of this one. So a sort of neglect of those areas. Plus the most important neglect is psychological and, you know, as you said in your initial remarks, very few people, even amongst the politicians, know the capitals of all the northeastern regions, the chief ministers of those regions, the chief justices of that area, how many languages do they speak, what script do they follow. Very few people know that. So these are the things which bred a separatism, you know, in the people.
Yeah, actually, you rightly, Mr. Padmanabhaiah, in fact, one of the things I forgot to mention was he held the senior most post, I think, one of the senior most posts with the Home Secretary of the Government of India, even though he was from the Maharashtra cadre, Mr. Padmanabhaiah. And that actually would have given you a lot of understanding of the complex issues that Northeasters faced later on when you became the interlocutor to the entire issue. But the point was that Nationalist Social Council of Nagaland, that is the Isaac-Mawuya group, which has now emerged as one of the major players in this entire issue, still negotiating with the Government of India, signed an agreement in 2015. But you were involved to a large extent in negotiating with them. You went to Amsterdam, you went to Bangkok, where these leaders were in exile, spoken to them, done all this. Now, where do you think, when you look at, and as I said, it started from Jawaharlal Nehru, it's still with Narendra Modi now. Where has the issue moved? Because is separatism the only thing they are demanding? Is a separate flag the only thing they are demanding? Separate constitution is the only, or there is something more complex? Because you took over from Mr. Suresh Kochattil and, you know, in terms of moving from a political entity to a bureaucratic entity. How difficult was this negotiating terms with these people?
Negotiating was difficult. It had its difficult parts. But let me tell you, I enjoyed the negotiations very much. And Muiwa is an extremely well-read, educated man. He had done his MA in political science from Guwahati University. And he's a great thinker. And I have very high respect for him. And I had my problems. You know, when he gets angry, I mean, when he doesn't, not angry, when he is not prepared to take my point of view, or when his point of view is not fully accepted, and then we question him, he goes into a totally silent mode, you know. He won't talk to you. And he would say, no more negotiation. No, I'm not carrying on this talk. So occasionally he used to do that. But occasionally I also did the same. I said, look, if you are not prepared to discuss with me, I also have no interest. So let me go back. So these things were there. But by and large, he's a very rational man, very rational human being, extremely good to generally.
In fact, I think you should just talk a little bit more in detail about his name in full and how the faction came into being, because for today's generation, they're not really aware of what the Isaac-Mawuya faction of NSIN is all about. Where did he come?
As I told you, there used to be only one group in the beginning. like splitting of the atom, they keep on happening, the one led by Mr. Fizo.
That was the initial one.
Naga National Council, that was the one. But then what happened, when Fizo died, he died in England, so it split between two groups called the NSCN. NSCN was formed, but one group. So NNC was there, but NSCN IM was created. Because it was created because the state government, they were not in favor of the state, which was formed in 1963. Then there were differences between the leaders. Then again it split into two, called NSCN Kaplang group and NSCN Isaac Sioux. These are the Sioux and Muiwa group, the two groups. In addition to these, there are so many other groups, 2-3 other groups, but the most important groups today are NSCN IM and NSCN K. But NSCN K basically operates in the Myanmar area, because there are a lot of Myanmar Nagas there. Okay. In fact, there is a Naga self-administered region in Myanmar. Now, I think 2015 or so, they created a self-administered Naga area to take care of the Nagas there. So that's how, whenever somebody does not agree with the government of India, or negotiating or agreeing to the government of India's proposal, a splinter group forms. That's how these things have come. How did the NSCN IM come? It was NSCN only.
Yes.
There was something called Shillong Accord, which was signed in 1975-76. And that accord is a very, very important accord. In fact, it would have put total stop to the insurgency in the northeast, in Nagaland. And there was a supplementary agreement along with the after the Shillong Accord, 1976, I think, describing the modalities of collecting the arms, disarming the insurgent groups, and then taking them into Indian Army or some other things. The entire drill was how they should be sort of in between, before you create some livelihood for them, where to keep those cadres. Everything was written down. If it had been followed up by the government of India properly, the problem would have been solved in 1975. But do you know what happened? Indira Gandhi lost her government because of the emergency and all that. And the next government had no interest in the Naga affairs at all, the Janata government and all that, which came. So by sheer neglect, when you did not look at that side, they grew up the insurgency. They got arms from China, Pakistan side. At that time it was East Pakistan. So they went on, not by that time. By that time, Bangladesh came, but still there was a lot of influence, those people supporting them. So the total support from Bangladesh elements and the Chinese elements have encouraged them to form these things.
But when you look at these factions, as you rightly said, splitting and splitting and splitting.
Yeah, it's splitting like an atom.
The point is, as a political negotiator, and it is not easy. Let me tell our viewers here that negotiating with an insurgent group in an alien territory like Amsterdam or Bangkok is extremely tough. It is not easy as much as negotiating in our own territory. And I think one point in time, Mr. Padmanabhaiah, you actually told them, look, you come to Delhi, we will talk to you in Delhi. And was Mr. Vajpayee then in power? I'm not sure who was the Prime Minister then.
Maybe Manmohan Singh ji or Vajpayee ji.
So I think that move of
I brought them to India. I brought them to Delhi.
India.
Yeah.
So that's what I just want you to talk to that, because bringing them to India was a psychological win for the government.
Absolutely. You see, the point is, they were totally reluctant to come to India, the leadership. Their argument was, Prime Ministers have agreed that it would be an unconditional talks. And 3 conditions were put by them. Unconditional from our side, but conditions from their side. The 3 were, the talks would be held outside India. The talks would be at the highest level, means Prime Minister or his representative. And then, these are the 2 ones, main ones. So what has happened, they were telling me all these things, their point of view, what should be done and all that. But I told them that, look here, I might agree with some of your points, what you are putting across. But I am not the final decision maker. The decision maker is not even the government of India. It would be the people of India. The people of India should understand you. The people of India would mean the ruling party, the opposition parties, the press, the civil society. All these people should accept your point of view, or at least have a sympathy to your point of view. So you must come to India, you must travel around India, go around India, see how the state governments function. You are talking of sovereignty. I don't understand what is the meaning of your sovereignty. According to me, every state government in India is sovereign. Prime Minister does not elect the Chief Minister, the people elect. And in Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka fellows don't vote, it is the Andhra people who vote. In Nagaland, it is the Naga people who would vote. It is the Naga man who is elected. The budget is made by you, nobody. So what are you talking about this? Perhaps the reason is because you do not understand the Indian system of working. You are only fed some information by your cadres, and that's what you believe. One is to understand you must come to India and go around India and see all the state governments. Talk to them how much freedom they have. Two, you talk to the ruling party, you talk to the opposition parties, you expose yourself to the press, talk to the press. I mean, this is how your point of view, if there is logic, it would spread. This is the point I told them, So you must come to India. And when they came to India, what I did was this, I think it's a very important point. They never understood the Constitution of India. They never studied, they never touched. The moment you said Constitution of India, they say that is your Constitution, we have nothing to do with it. We won't touch it. This is what they would say. And he would walk out. Then I told him that look, shared sovereignty, you are saying something else you are talking about. This is sovereign for us, the Constitution of India. If you don't understand the Constitution of India, how can these negotiations proceed? So I said I would conduct classes in, on the Constitution of India. I said, get all your cadres, your leaders. I would take 3 months course. I conducted course. You ask the people. I brought them to India. All the leaders, I used to tell them, various powers of the state government, powers of the central government, emergency powers, judiciary, what powers it has, the control of judiciary over the executive actions, all these things. And then special provisions made for Nagaland, special provisions made for other states, Manipur, even Andhra Pradesh. Andhra Pradesh has a special provision.
Correct.
Gujarat has a special provision. Sikkim has a special provision. Arunachal Pradesh has special provisions. I said, these are all part of the Constitution. Now, you must understand what is there. Then you can ask this plus something. So I took classes after they came. This is how I persuaded them to come to India, Otherwise, they were not coming.
Yeah, in fact, at one point they said, we will not negotiate with bureaucrats. We will not negotiate with you. We will negotiate only with politicians. And I think you and Mr. KP Singh, then Director General of Intelligence Bureau, both of you were there as a part of the team that negotiated with them and finally brought them to India, to Delhi, and then speak to the Prime Minister here at that point in time.
Incidentally, no politician succeeded me. I continued the talks for about 12 years. And another thing which we achieved at that time, which laid the basis for this
2015 agreement.
2015 agreement, the framework agreement. The framework agreement has been used, these words, for the first time in my negotiations in 2004. Padmanabhaiah said, this is the framework agreement. His point was, I would come to that in a minute. What was I saying about politicians? So no politician actually was involved. But what happened was, they said you would continue to be the chief negotiator under the overall supervision of a committee of ministers. A committee was constituted of 3 ministers. Oscar Fernandez, then Prime Minister's office, Mr. Chauhan, and one more gentleman from South India, Tamil Nadu, Raghupati or somebody. Those 3 ministers were constituted as a group of ministers for negotiations with this one. But I was the negotiator. I used to, all of them would participate, and that's how we continued. That is how it ended, by the time 2010, 2009 end, when I gave it up. That was the position. But the negotiations were by me and by the Director of Intelligence Bureau.
I think somewhere along there, Mr. Sangma's name was also mentioned, but
At one time,
he never
it was
took
mentioned.
over. He never was bothered because he also had a problem with other CMs of the Northeast.
Very true.
Because they felt that he was giving too much away and he was bringing in too much of importance. But more importantly, the ISAC Muva group of Nagaland, the NSCN that you talk about, when you talked of a ceasefire, the extended ceasefire or ceasefire itself, there was a huge amount of protest in other states, especially Manipur and other places. What was the misunderstanding about this word ceasefire when it was allied with the government of India? What went wrong with it, or what was right with it?
No, before I say that, let me say one thing. The Naga issue is not about Nagaland. In fact, Nagaland, out of all those states, is a very peaceful state. The most peaceful is, of course, Mizoram. But thereafter, I have statistics with me for the last 20 years, 2002, 2022, the total insurgency-related killings in all the states, you would find the least amount in Nagaland. Nagaland did not have many killings. The most affected was Manipur.
Okay.
Then Assam. These are the two states, Ulfa, Gilfa and all those things, So huge number of casualties there. In the Northeast, this is the lowest. And in the whole of the country, even beating the Assam, and I won't go into that. I was talking about...
the ceasefire part of it.
No, I wanted to talk about the Kashmir and the Maoists. The Maoist killings and the Kashmir killings are much higher than these things. But coming back to the Naga problem, the Naga problem is not really about Nagaland. It is about the Naga areas in other states in the Northeast. The problem is, there is a structural problem there. The Manipur problem, I would tell you, is Manipur comprises of a valley, central valley, which is only about 20% of the total area. But it has about 60% of the population. Meiteis, these are the
originally
blue-blooded Meiteis, Manipuris. The remaining area, about almost 70% of the area is hills in Manipur. A small valley with huge population and a big, about 70% area of hills surrounding this, habitated by tribals. There are two major tribes, the Nagas and the Kukis. These are the two people. So there is a constant conflict between the tribes in Nagaland, the tribes in Manipur and the valley people there, because of the higher educational qualifications, cultural this one. Till the British came and sort of gave them English education and all that, the tribals were sort of looked down upon by the Meiteis, who are well educated, scholarly, a lot of civilizational these things, patterns of art, dance, drama. Manipur has a fantastic dance form, Manipuri dance, and sports. All these things were concentrated. So there is a sort of disconnect between the valley and the people. And now this gentleman, these are 4 districts there called Ukrul, Tamenglong, Senapati, and one more, I am forgetting. The 4 districts of predominantly Naga people in Manipur. And this gentleman, Muiwa, who is the General Secretary, the most powerful man in this one, he is from Ukrul.
So technically he is not from Nagaland.
He is not from Nagaland at all. So a lot of these clashes took place in Manipur. Before ceasefire and all that, a lot of clashes used to take place in Manipur.
Is that reason why they call it Naglim?
Yeah, I would come to that. And in Assam, a lot of areas in Assam, border areas, are also inhabited by the Nagas. So the problem, the demand of those people was that we should create a greater Nagaland, and the word should be not Nagaland, it should be called Nagalim, means the birthplace, the place of Nagas, the place of Naga. Nagalim means the place of Nagas. That's what they wanted to do. So that's why the ceasefire, to answer the ceasefire question, the agreement between the government of about ceasefire was between the government of India and a body called NSCN-IM, National Socialist Council of Nagaland, in brackets IM Group, Isaac and SU and Muiwa group. So they are saying a ceasefire is between a militant group which is operating throughout the northeast, other than in Tripura and Mizoram, and the government of India. How can this ceasefire then be restricted only to Nagaland? In fact, Nagaland was not the main scene of trouble, main scene of conflict. The main scene of conflict was in the hill areas and the others of Manipur, and in the hill areas, the Naga areas and other areas of Assam, Naga areas and other areas of Arunachal Pradesh and all that. So that's where these people were concentrating their attacks. So if you confine it to only Nagaland, then they would attack somewhere else in retaliation. So it has to be a complete one. For example, a ceasefire in British Second World War, it is all over the world, it can't be one place, ceasefire. So that was the interpretation. There was some controversy on that, where the state's paramilitary forces, police forces are very strong. They felt that it should not be extended to their area. But where the state government security forces were weak, they welcomed it in some places.
That is like your Naxalite ceasefire, where they allowed themselves to be regrouped again.
Yeah.
And that is a chance for the militants to regroup.
Very right. So it can't be a sort of pick and choose. It has to be over the entire area. There was some controversy, but ultimately it was accepted, on that.
In fact, in the 2015 agreement, which you rightly said, the framework agreement for which you had created the entire documentation earlier, the Nagas have two sticking points, NSCM, IN. I'm not talking the entire Nagaland as such. One is, of course, the share.
But that is the most prominent group,
Yeah, the share of the sovereign power. Exact words that were used in the framework agreement.
You see, this is what I negotiated. I must tell you that. You see, this one was, in fact, there is a statement, a letter written to me by Muiwa in 2004. That is where the framework agreement, the origin took place. It was reiterated in 2006. Again, the framework between the two. The difference, the first, their demands were given to Mr. Suresh Kochattil in 1997. He did not respond to that. Then 2001, they gave it to me again, formally, their demands. And then I negotiated on that. We came to their starting point was, Nagaland is a separate country. We don't want to be part of India. But we don't want to be inimical with India. We want to be friendly with India, a permanent friendship with India. But we are separate, you are separate. So we are prepared to get into an agreement with, not in, with India as a separate sovereign country, but we would share some, some powers with the government of India and all that. This is how they started. And it's almost like you are different, we are different. So you don't even interfere with us, you give us this power. Then they diluted it over the course of all these dialogues. They said, no, we want to be very friendly. And friendly relations would be established by treaty, saying that inseparable bonds between India and Nagaland and all that. I said, look, it won't sell. I mean, you are separate, we are separate, there would be unbreachable, it cannot be sort of cut down, the bond between the two, friendship, eternal friendship and all that, but it won't work. Then they came to what is called shared sovereignty. In the sense, we are prepared to share some powers with government of India. For example, we have said defense, security, and then foreign relations, currency. There cannot be any compromise. They have to be, you have to follow the Indian system. So they said, okay, these are all stages in negotiation. That's not the final one. So they agreed that we would share these powers with the government of India, would exercise those things. But other things like forests, cooperatives, something else, land revenue, roads, buildings, all these things would be with Nagaland government. That is what it is in India. They don't understand that. In India, that is how it is. So I said there is a state list, there is a central list, there is a concurrent list. You first, Baba, you understand these things. So ultimately they came saying that there would be certain powers, there would be certain powers to be exercised by the Naga people, certain powers to be exercised jointly by Nagas and Government of India, certain powers to be exercised only by Government of India. Those 4 subjects I mentioned. This is how they said. But this should be incorporated in a separate constitution. I said, we can't give you a separate constitution. They said, Kashmir ko hai. I said, Kashmir is in problems, so we can't give you that. So then they said, okay, all these things should be incorporated in an elaborate manner within the Indian constitution, defining each one's power. That is what they call it as a shared sovereignty, This is what they were saying.
In fact, that particular agreement actually was leaked out by the NSC and
IM
group.
itself.
Yeah, but what you see that after that there was a kind of a cold war with the governor, then Governor T. Ravi, who now of course is the governor of Tamil Nadu. The problem was now we are back to square one again. Maybe they will, Mr. Modi might pick up the phone and call you and say, please come again and sort it out, because it seems to be going nowhere. They're back to square one. They're saying, no, we will not accept the separate, unless we have a separate country, separate flag, separate constitution. Things are back to square one. My point also was, along the way, might be a kind of a different kind of question here. China actually fingers India everywhere. They fund a lot of insurgent groups in India, provide them arms. We've seen that in Arunachal Pradesh. We've seen that down to when the Mizo conflict was at its peak. Of course, there is Myanmar on the other side. They have their own issues. But China never had a role to play in Nagaland, because I think Chinese never got along with the Nagas. Is there a reason for that?
Yes. I mean, I did not know this while conducting the negotiations. Ultimately, Muivai himself told me. He used to be very friendly with me. You see, what has happened is, in those days, in the initial days of this one, China supported them very much. In fact, there are different phases or stages of collaboration between. Chinese government itself used to supply arms to these fellows at one time to begin with, to fight against the Indian government. Then as time progressed and they realized that they cannot continue it, then they said there were agents, arms agents, arms sellers in Kunming and other parts of China. They said, look, you don't buy from us directly, you buy from them. Arms dealers were there in China, so they would supply the arms. These chaps used to regularly go and buy those things and come. In fact, they met Chou En-lai and all that. They went in a delegation, these fellows. So, then there was a sort of, in Nagaland, is a very, very democratic society. Decisions are taken at the village level. For each village takes its own decisions. They are all ultimately merged into a decision for the state. The Naga elders, village elders, began saying that, look, our motto of Nagaland's motto, that this one is Nagaland for Christ. You would see those things, boards, whenever you travel in Nagaland. It's a Christian state. 90% are Christians.
Baptist mostly.
Baptists, American Baptists. They said, we say Nagaland for Christ, and then Chinese fellows are most irreligious people. Why are we taking their support? So should we continue this policy? There was a debate, internal debate. And ultimately, this one decision was in favor of saying that we should not do anything with the Chinese. We should do our own this one. So the flow of arms from them completely came down to a trickle and then stopped because of this. Many people in the government did not know this. And they used to, especially the first BJP government when it came, people used to ask me, it is a Christian state, is there a lot of mischief by the Christians against the Indian state? Is it all sort of supported by the Christian missionaries and all that? I told the then Home Minister Advani ji, sir, it is not correct. In fact, Nagaland has been saved from China because of this Christian, this one. Because they said irreligious state hai, usse kya lena dena hai. That's how it was stopped, But, and then Bangladesh, our relations improved with Bangladesh. So Bangladesh also stopped, giving that. So many factors have taken place, I tell you.
And Myanmar also.
Yeah, then Myanmar agreement was there. And then Myanmar, as I told you, Myanmar has a self-governed Naga territory there.
Which is recognized by that government.
Recognized by that government. It is self-ruled by those fellows. Because there are about 15 tribes there. And that is all within Kaplang groups, this one, I think Kaplang died perhaps.
So that question is even Mr. Movia, if you look at it, he's 82, if I'm not mistaken. And the last generation of the old guards are there. Isaac, of course, is gone, but Movia is still there. Now, when you look at the young generation that is presently there in Nagaland, they must have got sick and tired of this fighting, this kind of activities, the terrorist activities, the insurgent activities all along. And somewhere along the way, we see a lot of youngsters from Nagaland moving to Indian cities like other parts of Northeast also, coming from Manipur, Mizoram and Tripura. They are also coming into the Indian mainland and actually speaking to the Indians coming down to Bangalore, Hyderabad, Chennai, Mumbai and other cities, Delhi also. And they are kind of now with the Indian government, they are with the Indian citizen, they work here. But still many Indians are not comfortable having them around. I mean, I remember there was a controversy in Delhi where they were called by a particular nickname which is not liked by the Indian government. But do you think that young generation is making a shift, a change that is happening there?
A lot of change has taken place on 2-3 fronts. First thing I would tell you, this ceasefire is going on from 1997, except some very minor, that one incident you have told
21
me.
years.
Leaving that, 1997 to 2023, how many years is that? 23 plus 3.
26.
In these 26 years, people who used to be in the forests, jungles and all that with their arms, they all came out. They met their families and they keep coming and going because there is no fighting. Now, do you think that these fellows would go back to the jungles and take up fight again?
They have to earn a living somehow.
Right, they have to earn a living. They have come back. They are part of the society. They might, some of them might be doing some mischief here in the sense extortion, वगैरह. But by and large, a lot of them came. And 23 years, what would he do? He had to settle down and do some job, something else. So, that's one. The second thing is, one of the main reasons for the insurgency in the Northeast region is the utter neglect of the Northeast region in the development point of view and also psychological point of view. Because they are a different ethnic tribe, they are Mongoloid features and all that. Our fellows always used to call them chinks or this, that and all those things. But they also, in fact, I was there as Home Secretary in 97, 94 to 97. They would call the fellows outsiders, Indians going there, they would say, what, you damn outsiders. There is a word for outsiders in the Northeast, it's called Mayangs. What are you doing here? You get lost, don't come here. Even officers, they would say, we don't want the officer from outside. So they used to call us outsiders. But today what has happened is, so many of the people from the Northeast, including Nagaland, have come into the mainstream India. They are there in Pune, they are there in Bangalore, they are there in Hyderabad, they are there in Delhi, they are there in Calcutta doing so many jobs, especially in the soft, services industries, hotels and receptionists and IT business and all these things. I realized the amount of people who have come out from the Northeast into India when some rioting took place in Bangalore and the trains were full loaded to Assam, by these people. They couldn't get tickets for 3-4 days. So many Northeast people from Assam and all that, and from Nagaland, they have come into the mainstream India. So now our fellows are calling them foreigners. Some of them. In Delhi, because they dress separately, they eat separately, they have, more free, girls talk to boys and all that. So they have a more liberal, outlook. So our fellows used to say, we don't want these people in our neighborhood, this, that and all that. So, I mean, a lot depends on the civil society also. How this would shape out, work out, would depend on the Indian civil society.
I think that somewhere along the way we got to become more broad-minded.
We have to become broad-minded. We must accept them. They have a rich culture, all the northeastern states. They have tremendous values. The ladies are sort of women are respected so much. The Naga Mothers Association is one of the most powerful groups there, which has an influence on the son or on the husband. In fact, I worked through them to get the ceasefire going. I used to always talk to the Naga Mothers Association, who had a lot of influence on these people to come back, So there are so many democratic system of governance and all that. We have a lot to learn from that northeastern area, So to answer your question, I think and this is increasing in this government, roads have been opened, communication is going there, a lot of more money is being sent there, and we are much more tolerant now to the other Christian groups or whatever it is.
There is even a minister now in charge of Northeast. I think Mr.
Yeah.
Kishan Reddy is there.
Ridzu and all that.
Kiran Rijiju, and Kishan Reddy ji also is a part of
Right.
the development of
So
Northeast.
I think time would heal these things. You don't have to rush really the.
So your advice is that to the government of India today, if you are an advisor to them on the same issue, would be cool down.
Cool down.
These things
cool
will
down.
pass.
Things will pass. You see, let me. If you dig up everything, I have a grouse against the press also. In the sense, they might call me names. You go to Mr. Muiva, who is in Delhi these days, and ask, Mr. Muiva, have you given up your demand for sovereignty? You would ask him. Now, what would he say?
He will not say no. He will never agree to it.
He would say, no, I have never given up. But what is his sense of sovereignty? What does he mean by that? I mean, nobody has this one. So the press also provokes them, by asking sometimes.
They need some masala for that.
There is a masala. No, you don't rake up old things. For example, Maharashtra and Karnataka boundary issue, Belgaum and all that. So occasionally somebody raises the damn thing, people become friendly and everything disappears. I tell you, there is a greater integration of these things, but we must, somewhere in your questionnaire, you have said, naturally, he knows many of the finer details of the issue at hand, also what happened for decades in what is seen as a game of bluff, you have said. Now, this is the thing which killed the Naga, peace. They think any negotiator who goes there or any promises that are given, it is a game of bluff. You are never sincere. You are not sincere when you are talking to us. This is their main complaint, we was. So I think what I achieved was, they could rely on me completely. But I also told them, there is no point in your convincing me, because I am one voice. I would go and tell the government of India, there is everything in your favor. They would give me a slap and say, get lost. You have become a part of the NSA and I am. I mean, so they think I am canvassing your case. I can't canvass your case. You come to India and meet everybody and convince them,
Yeah, I think even the base thing, I think somewhere on the way you mentioned that civil service officers were called suitcase officers. Those days.
They were. So
the IAS officers who get posted.
all these things have changed, are changing slowly because of our more focus on the Northeast and all that. Devi Gowda has contributed a lot to this. He is the one who created the Ministry for the Northeast Development, and then funds have been allocated. 5% or 10% of budget of every department has to be spent in the Northeast, and non-lapsable funds. If the money could not be spent in that particular year, it would not lapse. It would go into a pool. It would be spent next year. These things were, poor man was there only for 11 months as the Prime Minister, but he did a fantastic amount of work there. He is one Prime Minister who travelled in the Northeast very extensively.
I think that's what even, I heard Mr. Amit Shah speaking yesterday saying that the budget has gone up from 14,000 crores to 80,000 crores. Huge
So
amount
it's a
of money.
natural process, I tell you. These things would take time. Every country in the world has got some pockets of resistance. Spain has got so many areas. France has got the area. England has got Scotland, Ireland and all that. So don't think that we must sign an agreement. It's a process. It's a process.
I actually admire you, Ms. Padmanabhaiah, because the skill, I know Suresh Kochattil one day got angry. For those who are not really aware of who Suresh Kochattil is, was husband of Sushma Swarajji. And at one point in time, I think he was the last political negotiator with the Naga issue.
Correct.
And one day, I think
he was the first and last.
And
he only was there for a few months.
Yeah, and he got angry one day and he just threw up his job and walked out. And I think after that, you were called by the Prime Minister to come and start the negotiations again. Negotiation is a big skill, isn't it? I mean, let's just forget the Naga issue for the present. But when you're negotiating with somebody, and this is true for today's business generation, today's management students, today's politicians, today's bureaucrats, negotiation is not about putting your point of view and saying, accept what I'm saying. It is also listening to the other side and taking their point of view and then coming to a consensus. Don't you agree, Mr. Padmanabhaiah?
I was telling people, the only thing which saw me through the negotiations very successfully, I would say, because what Government of India is wanting to sort of sign, has been developed over a course of 12 years by me at various stages. From you are separate, we are separate, your constitution, our constitution, to now a question of shared sovereignty within the Indian Union, Earlier they used to say between Indian Union and Nagaland.
Yeah, those words are very crucial actually.
Yeah, between and within is, an entirely different one. All this has been brought out only because of one quality: patience. He would turn his chair, show his back to me and say, I am walking out. Muiva. So, but I never was perturbed. I had tremendous patience. And second thing which helped me is their perception of me that he is an extremely sincere fellow. What he says is what he means. There is no hidden agenda here. And he is plain. And we can rely on him. If he promises something, he would try his very best to get it done. If he cannot do, because political decisions may be different, he would be out. Doesn't matter. But he is sincere in his approach. That is what was.
Today Mr. Ravi is not there. He is now the governor of Tamil Nadu. Now that position is there's a vacuum there. At any point
he's not there?
Yeah, no, but he moved on from there to Nagaland to Tamil Nadu, and the NSCN says they don't believe anymore in him. He changed crucial words in the framework agreement. But at any point in time, do you think...
A new relationship, they said that word.
Yeah, new relationship. So, the words are very, very crucial.
In the sense, a boyfriend and a girlfriend. You see, then he also used to say, Miwa is such an interesting fellow. If you want to marry a girl, you woo her by giving gifts, by doing this and that, praising her, you are so beautiful, you are so nice and all that. Now, if you are criticizing Nagaland every time and Naga people, how would you become friendly with us? How would we become friendly with you? So he always used to say, these are all psychological things, And I think it's very, very important. Very important, this.
The Armed Forces Special Powers Act also was a big thorn in the flesh. I think entire Northeast. Mr. Modi has promised, Mr. Amit Shah has promised that
he has said that soon we would like to lift it. I think it's a bad law. It's a bad law. I am not talking from the Nagaland point of view, but from the entire country. Do you know the law says they can use force to the extent of killing? Why should you say that? Proportionate force can be used. Now, you can amend it, but they say if you amend it, that means that was not your intention. That means you cannot cause death.
Yeah, I think the Indian government under Narendra Modi ji actually rightly showed in Jammu and Kashmir how things can be done. For a state that used to be always on the boil, always with stone throwing, fighting between terrorists and security forces, still goes on, but the intensity has decreased.
Has come down tremendously.
I think in the Northeast also we are seeing similar thing, because Nagaland is not the only issue. There were issues with the Mizos before. There's still an issue with the Manipur
Manipur is the
insurgent groups.
Is the insurgent groups, I tell you. That is the crux of the Northeast is now Manipur.
That is another negotiator would be needed there also. I think that is a wonderful conversation that we had with Mr. Padmanabhaiah, because that kind of experience that he brings to the table in terms of being a negotiator. Of course, as a civil service officer, he was known for the sugar revolution in Maharashtra, which today is blossomed into a big industry out there. Of course, then he moved into the central government. He was a Home Secretary, as I mentioned. And after that, also Police Reforms Commission and other Staff Selection Board, all other committees he headed post-retirement. But I think the most important point of his career would be this long negotiating period with the NSIN, Isaac Movia Group, in Amsterdam, in Bangkok, in India, speaking to them different times, different days, different months, having come to a situation right now where they're willing to sit across the table and talk with the Indian government. I think that a lot of that credit goes to Mr. Padmanabhaiah, sir.
They permanently came to Delhi. He has been living in Delhi for the last 10 years or so. And earlier he used to say, what have I to do in Delhi? I would not come.
I think that's a big credit to you actually, because I think today's students of diplomacy, today's students of management have to learn this art of negotiating. And how do you negotiate with people who are not willing to listen to you in the first place? And I think there's a lot of lessons in that. Mr. Padmanabhaiah, thank you a lot for speaking to us at Nationalist Hub. And that Mr. Padmanabhaiah answered our questions, and he gave us clear views on various things that he did in his entire career, especially this negotiation process. I'm sure that many of you who would not have known about Northeast and the Nagaland issue would have learned something what really took place behind the scenes. Thank you, Mr. Padmanabhaiah, for sparing your time and speaking to us at Nationalist Hub. Thank you very much.
Normally, I haven't spoken much on Nagaland, but you raised my interest once again. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Please subscribe to Nationalist Hub English channel for more interesting videos. And don't forget to like and share this video. Nationalist Hub, it's a news revolution.